It was my uncle's land, not ours. A wide patch of fenced pasture tucked behind an overgrown cornfield, an hour from any town that mattered. My parents used to leave me there during long weekends when I was a kid. I'd roam the place with our dog, Toby, a mixed breed with more legs than sense. That summer, I came back alone. I was 19 and broke, and my uncle offered me a few $100s to house sit while he visited his sister in Arizona. The place hadn't changed. Same cracked tiles in the kitchen, same greasy fingerprints on the fridge door. I stayed in the guest room with a tiny fan that wheezed in circles through the heat. Toby came with me. He was older now, slower, but he still barked at squirrels like they owed him money. The first few days passed without trouble. I read, watched TV, fixed a broken gutter, made lazy dinners. In the evenings, I let Toby run out into the back pasture while I sat on the porch steps. The fence was in bad shape. Sections were leaning. Some wire was broken, but there was nothing out there besides cows and birds, so I didn't worry. I figured Toby would stay close. He always had. On the fourth evening, he didn't come back. He'd chased something into the high grass near the edge of the cornfield. I waited with the porch light on, whistling now and then, but the night dragged on. No sign of him. Around midnight, I took a flashlight and went out. The field was quiet, no insects, no wind. Just the sound of my boots in the grass. I followed the path he usually took, cutting through the pasture. I called his name, still nothing. I walked further, reaching the low point where the ground dipped before the cornfield. The grass here was higher than my waist. I found his collar near a patch of disturbed earth. No blood, just the collar, unbuckled, lying next to a short length of nylon leash he always dragged behind him. I scanned the area with the flashlight. That's when I saw the hole. Someone had dug into the soil, rough edges, uneven shape, maybe 3 feet deep. It was fresh, the dirt loose and darker than the sun-baked crust around it. A leash was half buried at the edge, like someone had kicked soil over it in a rush. I backed away. My first thought was that it might have been an animal. A fox, maybe, or a coyote. But foxes don't dig straight holes, and they don't unclip collars. I went back to the house and locked the door. The next morning I returned with a shovel. The hole hadn't changed. No sign of animals, no tracks I could recognize. I cleared the top layer. The leash was intact. Underneath it was nothing but dirt. I kept digging. 4 feet, 5, nothing. That afternoon, I drove into town and asked if anyone had seen a loose dog. The cashier at the gas station shook her head and said, "Not many people came through anymore." I left a flyer on the bulletin board anyway. That night, I heard movement outside. It was faint, a single noise at first, metal against wood, then something shifting near the porch. I turned off the lights and looked through the side window. Someone was near the fence. A figure crouched low, back turned, working on something. The motion was deliberate. I stayed at the window until the figure disappeared into the grass. Then I waited longer. I don't know how long. I didn't sleep. In the morning I found a second hole. Same size, same shape. This one was closer to the house, just beyond the sagging fence line. Another leash was coiled nearby. Not Toby's. This one was blue and frayed with a clasp that had been bent out of shape. I drove to the edge of town and stopped at the animal shelter. I asked if they'd had any reports of missing dogs. The woman behind the counter blinked twice, then said, "Yes, a few. Farm dogs mostly, nothing recent." I asked if anyone was picking them up, trapping them maybe. She gave a tired shrug. Said folks in the county didn't always ask questions when dogs disappeared. Coyotes, most likely, she said. But it wasn't coyotes, not with cut leashes. That night, I stayed on the porch with the lights off. I didn't bring Toby's name up anymore. I didn't call into the dark. I just sat with a flashlight in my lap, pointed at the steps. At some point past midnight, I heard someone walking along the side of the house, not creeping, just walking, slow and steady. The motion light flicked on. I saw a part of a shoulder, a pant leg, then nothing. I didn't move until dawn. When the sun came up, I followed the prints through the grass. They led to a section of fence that had been cut and rewrapped with wire, not by an animal. There were boot prints near the hole, and a narrow path pressed into the grass that curved behind the barn and ended at a rusted gate I hadn't opened in years. I checked the gate. The lock was new. I didn't wait for my uncle to come back. I left him a note and took the highway east. A week later, I called him, asked if he'd noticed anything strange when he got home. "No," he said, "but the pasture's been quiet. Haven't seen a rabbit or groundhog since I got back, like they cleared out." He laughed. I didn't. I never found Toby, but every once in a while I dream about that collar lying in the grass, just barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, like someone had placed it there, like it was meant to be seen. I was 21 when I took the job in Vermont. I had no particular skills, no real direction. Someone I'd met at a seasonal gig said a woman near Montpelier paid cash to help with trail maintenance through her family's old orchard. She lived alone and didn't ask questions. That was enough. The orchard stretched across a long hillside bordered by dense forest. Rows of skeletal apple trees clawed upward, their bark dry and pale like the bones of animals left in the sun. Most of the apples had fallen to rot. The soil was soft in places, unexpectedly so. She paid me weekly to clear brush, repair fencing, and walk the trails to report any damage. The paths wound between trees and then cut through the woods, unmarked but easy to follow. She said not to veer from them. The farmhouse sat at the top of the property, crooked and gray. She didn't speak much, just handed me a thermos each morning and a short list of tasks. I never saw her leave the house. On my third week, I found the cage. It was down a slope I hadn't walked before, off one of the lesser-used trails. A set of rusted metal bars jutted out from the undergrowth, half swallowed by ivy and leaves. At first, I thought it was old farm equipment. But when I pulled the brush away, I uncovered a cage just large enough to crawl inside. Its hinges were still intact. The door had been secured with a padlock, now broken. Inside, there were bones, fresh ones. Small animals, I guessed. Rabbits, maybe. But it was the plastic bag in the corner that held my attention. Inside were wrappers, torn clothing tags, a child's sock. None of it made sense. Above the cage, nailed to a low branch, was a trail cam. The lens was pointed directly at the opening. I stood there longer than I should have. I don't know what I expected. A noise snapped me out of it, branches underfoot, somewhere up the hill. I looked toward the sound, but the trees were too thick. I covered the cage with brush and left. I didn't mention it to her. There was no right way to bring it up. She was waiting on the porch when I got back, smoking with one hand and holding a notepad in the other. She pointed out new fencing that needed reinforcing and asked if I'd seen any tracks. "Nothing new," I said. That night, I walked through the photos on my phone, I hadn't taken one of the cage. I thought about going back with my own camera, but something about it made that feel wrong, like documenting it would tie me to it. The next morning I returned to the slope. I walked slower this time, watching for landmarks I remembered. The trail looked the same, but I couldn't find the exact turnoff. I doubled back twice. Nothing. After lunch I tried again. I moved deeper than I had before, and eventually I found it. But the cage was gone. The brush looked recently disturbed, not in a way that nature does it. Something had been moved. The soil in places was darker, and a section of moss had been peeled away and flipped like carpet. The branch where the camera had been was broken. I marked the spot with a torn strip of cloth from my jacket and walked back to the trail. I didn't go near that slope again. She asked fewer questions after that. Or maybe I answered them differently. I spent the rest of the week repainting signs and replacing trail markers that had vanished. More of them were missing than I expected. On Friday, she paid me early. She told me I could take the weekend off. Her voice was flat. I left before sunrise on Saturday, packed my things quietly and drove down the gravel path. Before the turn onto the highway, I glanced back once. There was a new sign nailed to one of the trees, hand-painted, the letters uneven. Private land. Do not enter. A few weeks later, I tried to pull up satellite images of the property, but the resolution was low. The trails didn't show. Neither did the house. Just trees and a long, pale scar of cleared land. I've worked a dozen jobs since then. Some lasted a month, others a season. I've patched fences in Montana, scrubbed showers at campgrounds in Oregon, and poured concrete for basements in rural Indiana, most of it blurred together. Early mornings, burned coffee, temporary co-workers who barely asked your name. Every now and then, someone would bring up Vermont. People love talking about places they've never been. The mountains, the lakes, the quaint towns that look like postcards. I nod when they mention it, offer nothing. There's always someone who pushes, asks if I've ever been up that way. I just say I passed through. It's easier than explaining the orchard, the woman, the missing trail markers. I don't talk much about Vermont. Sometimes I think about the cage, not what it was for, just the fact that someone watched it and waited. I was driving through back roads in Kansas 2 hours past sunset, somewhere between Wichita and nowhere. My GPS lost signal half an hour earlier, and I hadn't seen another car in miles. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. I'd taken a detour to avoid construction, and now I was deep in farm country with no real idea where I was going. The road was narrow and cracked, bordered by fields that stretched into black. I kept the windows down to stay awake. The night air smelled like fertilizer and dust. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the road, one arm raised. His truck was parked on the opposite shoulder, hazard lights blinking slow and uneven. I slowed. He didn't wave, just kept his arm up like he was hailing a bus. Late 30s, maybe older, ball cap, work jacket, nothing strange. Just a guy whose truck gave out in the middle of nowhere. I rolled to a stop and leaned over to unlock the passenger door. He opened it, but didn't get in. "Appreciate it," he said. "My buddy's just over that rise. Can you help us out?" I looked past him. The fields were flat, nothing but grass and dark sky. The only rise was the shallow slope of the road itself. "Sure," I said. "Is he hurt?" The man shook his head. "Nah, just stuck. If you pull around, there's a little turnout just up ahead. We can flag you from there." I pulled forward slowly. The turnout was maybe 50 feet ahead. Gravel patch with enough space to turn around. I checked the mirror. He was still standing there watching me drive. I waited a few seconds. No one waved me down. Something felt mismatched. If there were two of them, where was the second guy? I got out and walked to the back of the car. The truck was still there. The man had crossed the road and was opening the passenger side door. He paused when he saw me looking. "It's quicker if we go now," he said. I didn't answer. My hands were in my pockets, fingers wrapped tight around my keys. He kept his hand on the door handle, waiting. Then I noticed movement behind the truck. Someone was crouched near the back wheel on the driver's side. No flashlight, no tools, just kneeling. I stepped back toward the driver's door. The man at my car glanced behind him, then back at me. "He's checking the tire," he said. I got in and closed the door, locked it, started the engine. I didn't look in the mirror until I was a mile up the road. Nothing behind me, just fields and dark. I kept driving. I didn't slow down for turns, didn't stop at the next intersection. No GPS, no signal. I just picked a direction and stayed with it. 10 minutes later, I saw lights behind me. Headlights, far back but steady. I passed 2 empty crossroads, no turns. The lights followed. There were no towns nearby. No reason for anyone to be out here this late unless they lived here. And if they lived here, they wouldn't be tailing me on open roads for no reason. I sped up. So did they. After another mile, I pulled into a dirt path between 2 fields, killed my lights, waited. The vehicle passed a few seconds later. Same truck, same broken hazard lights clicking on and off. And it didn't slow, just kept going. I waited a while before turning around, took a different road west. It added an hour to my trip. I didn't care. The next day, I checked the map. There was no turnout on that stretch, no connecting road, no reason for a vehicle to be parked there. Nothing but private farmland. I zoomed in, field, fence, ditch. That was it. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't know what I'd report. A man standing by a fake breakdown with a silent friend behind the truck. Nothing happened, but it could have. And the way he kept his hand on that door, like he was waiting for the exact second I looked away, stays with me more than anything else.